for the second episode of This Dream Is Yours. Laura, it's so great to have you here.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
And I wanted to talk a little bit about why I asked you to be on the show, because I was super excited when you told me about a dream that you accomplished to build a home in Costa Rica. And first of all, I thought, are you kidding me? That is so brave. I would totally chicken out to do something like that.
I almost did.
And it's always been one of my dreams to have another property someplace in Europe, whether it's Spain or Portugal, or I haven't spent any time in Costa Rica, so I don't know a lot about it. So I'm looking forward to learning about that. But it seems like such a big thing, and maybe for you, because you've done it now, it's not. But was it always a dream of yours to have something like that? And that's what I want to talk about. And I also want to get a sense of just kind of a little bit more about you, because even though I've known you for 8 years now, I don't really know you great. So I wanted to understand a little bit more about where you come from. And so tell me about Laura Merrill.
Well, I've actually, the real estate portion of things has sort of always been sort of my side thing. I'm a nurse. I'm a registered nurse. I've been working that for 20 plus years now.
Wow, I didn't realize it had been that long.
It has been. Started out in the Bay Area and then Sacramento area and now up in the Roseville area. So that's always been kind of my bread and butter.
Did you grow up in the Bay?
No, I grew up in Texas actually.
Oh, really? Whereabouts?
Tyler,
Texas. I know exactly where that is. It's flat out there.
It is. And spent a lot of time in Austin too. That's where my mom's from. She grew up in Austin. So we spent a lot of time visiting there with family and friends. And I lived there in the 90s and then moved to the West Coast.
Okay.
Portland, Oregon first, and then down to the Bay Area in 2002. So
when you were a child, you grew up in what area?
In Houston until I was about 4 or 5-ish, and then we moved up to the Tyler area, and that's where I grew up, grade school and high school.
So when you were a kid, what kind of things did you think you would do? Did you think you'd be a nurse when you grew up? What was your...
I had no idea, and actually my first degree was environmental science, and I did that down in Austin. But then I moved up to Portland and found that it was a very saturated job market. So it was a little bit of a transition time of like, okay, I've got all this really great information about environmental sciencey stuff, but I can't really necessarily find a good job in that field, or would have to go back to school for that if I wanted to progress on to a master's or something. That writing was on the wall. So at that point, I always knew that, well, nursing has a big demand, and I knew I didn't want to be in an office cubicle or just doing something like that. And I had seen enough of those jobs around that I was like, well, I don't want to really necessarily go that direction. I've got to go back for school or training with something. So decided to move into the nursing field. And I ended up doing that down in the Bay Area and started up my nursing career down at Alta Bates in Berkeley.
Well, has that been something that you're glad that you did? Has it been a good career for you?
It has been a good career for me, absolutely. It's one of those things where I kind of had my list of, I don't want to work in the cubicle. I want to be in a field where I'm continually learning things and can transition to different aspects of things, which is totally medicine. And then I also didn't want my job to dictate where I had to live. Like I didn't want to get locked into a certain city or area where I wouldn't necessarily be able to move elsewhere with my work if I so desired. So it's been good for that.
You mentioned learning-based, a job that's learning-based, and this dream that you had about building a home in Costa Rica. I can bet that you learned a lot in that process.
I did, absolutely.
Where did that come from, the idea to do something in Costa Rica? Had you traveled there? Why Costa Rica?
I had not traveled there. I traveled there the first time about 3 or so, has it been about 3 years ago? And I absolutely fell in love with the Caribbean side. And I've traveled a decent amount, Thailand and Bali, and beautiful areas and beachy places that were just magnificent. But something about the wildlife, the birds, the sloths, the beautiful, pristine
I saw
beaches.
The sloth video, and I've never seen a sloth, and I just think they're the coolest animals on the planet.
The first time we were there, I've got a picture of my daughter. She's on the beach, and there's the sloth just crawling around on the beach right there. And I'm told that that's a pretty unusual occurrence, but can be seen more frequently in that particular area. And
So what made you pick the area where you ended up? Because I know that you're on the Caribbean side.
Correct.
And a lot of people are on the other side.
Yes.
So what was it about that specific area that just kind of drew your attention?
I think, well, we explored the Pacific side as well, and those are beautiful areas and beautiful beaches. I like the little more quiet, less touristy, less populated area.
Okay.
And the pristine beaches with these beautiful canopies of trees and the super soft sand. And there's many beaches along that Caribbean coast, obviously, but the area...
Is the water really warm?
It is.
And clear?
It is,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, they can have some pretty good rip currents, so you got to be mindful of that, obviously. But and there are some areas with more coral and some areas with more sand and a little more, calmer waters. So there's a lot of natural refugios. There are wildlife refuges down there for Costa Rica. So those areas that just have some of the most beautiful rainforests.
So let me take you
stunning.
back. 3 years ago,
3 years ago.
you had never been to Costa Rica.
Correct.
So was going to Costa Rica to look to buy real estate on your
No,
mind? Or
it was
you
on
just
a
went?
vacation.
You just went on vacation.
With family, exploring it. And when I saw that area, I was very curious about well, what's it like to own property down here? And that's when I started researching it a bit. We had gone on that trip, started on the Caribbean side, went to the Pacific side as well during that trip, and I just really was enchanted with the Caribbean side. I really loved it.
When did this dream occur? Like, I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to actually just dive in. Because that was the part when you told me that you did that, I thought, I don't know that I'd have the nerve to do that. Because I know, because I like to know everything about everything.
I know.
Before I dip my toe in.
And I'm a bit of a control freak in that
So how do you Nike it? How do you just do it?
Right. So, previously, my daughter's father and I, when we were together, we had bought some real estate when the housing market was very low and in the 2010, 2011 through 2013.
Right.
So we were able to invest in real estate at that time. When we ended up moving up to Auburn back in 2017, I had sold the properties that I had gotten in the divorce and had just invested it with a great financial advisor that I love and I've become really good friends with, who's helped me a lot in this process as well. But then once COVID hit and we all watched the stock market and our investments just take a real dive and a real time of uncertainty.
Kind of scary too.
It was, and we watched all of it, like the retirement accounts and my savings account from real estate. And so it was very disconcerting that, do I even really know what all I'm investing in? And so once that opportunity arose in Costa Rica, which was a couple of more trips into that area before I was like, okay, this is where I'm going to go and this is what I want to buy. It just felt like, well, I want to invest in this. At least that's what I think I want to invest in. So it was sort of some baby steps of talking to different realtors, finding out, well, what is it even like for expats or foreigners to own property? Can they own property? Found out, yes, they can. Had a great real estate agent that I've worked with down there. And
how did you find them? Because obviously we were connected through real estate. So
right.
How did you find the realtor down in Costa Rica?
So I talked to a few of them, and the one that I just ended up clicking with, Eric Ewell, he was just fabulous. I just felt like I chatted with him on the phone that first trip down for probably a solid 30, 45 minutes of just picking his brain and getting information from him about the area. And then we went back home, and then I was like, gosh, I really want to get back down there. Now, granted, this was shortly after things were opening back up somewhat with COVID. So am I just so vacation starved that now I'm just like, the first thing I see, let me have it, because I just haven't been on vacation
right.
during all this time.
Stuck in your house with a mask on.
Right. So I'm like, all right.
And you were in the hospital. So for you,
so I
that
was working.
A really traumatic time period.
I was fortunate enough not to have to work on the COVID floors, but still, it was a very busy time for us. There was plenty of opportunity for work. I was definitely not at home.
So how did you keep the dream alive of going to Costa Rica? Because a lot of people will say, well, I would love to do this.
Right.
Or I want to do that. But they never do anything.
Sure.
They just think about it.
Yeah.
What was the trigger, or what made you just say, you know what, screw it, I'm just going for it?
Well, I wanted to find out, do I really love this area as much as I think I do? Or did I just land in my first vacation for the last couple of years and just like, oh, give it to me? So I planned another trip. My daughter and another dear friend of mine, I had talked it up to my brother and sister-in-law. So they're like, we'll go back down there in May with you and check it out some more. And so that trip went back down there just to the Caribbean side to figure out, okay, let's explore this a little bit more. Met with Eric the realtor, saw some different areas around there, knew that I wanted to be close to Punta Uva, which is a beautiful beach area that's a little bit further south, closer to the Panamanian border there.
So where do you fly into, just out of curiosity?
I fly into San Jose. So
Okay.
San Jose, Costa Rica is their capital, and it's still a little ways to get to the property.
How long does it take you?
If you are going to drive, it's probably a good 4.5, 5 hours, but you can take a small flight to the Caribbean side to the city of Limon. And then it's about an hour or so from there.
Got it. Okay.
So that
you
30-minute...
You're rural. You're not in
Correct.
in the mix, so
right,
to speak.
right. I mean, there's still a lot going on there, and there's still many tourists, but it's not quite as inundated, I would say, as the Pacific side.
Very cool.
And it's definitely more off the beaten path, so it's going to take you a little bit more of a challenge to get down there.
So you're looking at properties, and were you looking at these properties thinking, okay, this is the one that speaks to me, or what was it that, and then did you have a vision of how this house was going to look, and what happened next?
Well, so I looked around in May, and I really enjoyed the area, loved it, and then I think even before I came down in May, I realized, if I really want to explore this area, I need to figure out a time that I can get down there kind of almost by myself without having my daughter and like, okay, I got to keep an eye out on my 11-year-old. And,
Right.
So I had booked another trip down a couple of months after that. So that was a trip that I ended up going by myself to just really explore the nuts and bolts. I had looked at some areas and properties that time in May, but then when I came back right before I was arriving in July, my realtor had mentioned some property that he thought I might be interested, close to the beach area that I really liked, and it was owned by some Americans that had had it for many years.
And never done anything.
They had never done anything with it. They were aging out. They, I think, were having some health issues, and they needed to get it sold sooner rather than later.
Interesting.
And it was way more property than I had anticipated getting. They had 5.25 hectares, which is about 12.5, almost 13 acres.
Wow. Did you
Yeah.
buy all that?
I did.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that was sort of, when I came in July, Eric showed me that property. He showed me other properties too, but that particular property had a little hilltop that just looked out over the Panamanian mountains, and it had been sort of prepped and easier to build on, meaning it was already a level open area. There was electricity nearby. There was a road. So all these things that made it like you've checked a lot of things off of your list in order to start from scratch to build something. And then after looking at that, it was sort of like, well, this is almost 13 acres. What they're asking for this, if I do this, I'm not going to have any money to build anything. So we negotiated with them for much less than what they were asking for, and went ahead and put an offer in. It was just sort of, all right, let's see what happens. It was an amazing trip. That was the trip where I did a lot of just exploring of that area. The day of walking on the beach and seeing my little sloth friend hanging out in the
so
trees,
cool.
which was so neat. And then as I'm just all aglow from seeing that guy. And then I'm walking further down, and a random sign on, by the beach in Spanish basically says the change starts today. And I was like, oh, that's kind of a
I kind
cool
of got
little
goosies on that.
sign, right? And so I had been chitty-chatting with my financial advisor of just...
I totally got goosebumps on that one. Because there's always some subliminal message.
There is,
When
right?
I think you're dreaming towards something, you get a message and it just feels authentic.
Right.
And so, but so many people will have that authentic message and they don't take a step.
Right.
And it's that one step to actually just moving towards it it's just so cool that you did it, because even if I saw a sloth, I don't know if I would have.
It was just feeling that warm coziness for the entire area, and even walking home, because I would just rent little places when I would go visit there, and walking home that night along the beach, the stars were out, and I look up kind of if I were going to be looking at where that property was, and I'm like, God, there's a big constellation up there. What is that? I get out my little phone, and I'm not into horoscope stuff, but it was my sign. It was literally Scorpio.
Oh my goodness, that's
right
crazy.
above, and I'm like, what? And then the bioluminescence was in the water, and I don't know if you've ever seen that.
I've never seen that.
But it is like a gazillion fireflies in the water type of thing. Like, it's this electrical lighting up. It is neat. It is trippy. It is super cool. And all of that was happening, and I got on the phone with my financial advisor, and I was like,
do it.
Well, he was a little more reserved about that.
I'm sure he was, because you're taking money out of your stock account, right?
Exactly. And, when you're working down there, you have to come up with cash. It's not like, okay, well, how do I get a mortgage on this? Well, you got to figure out your financing wherever you're coming from.
So that's good to
you
know.
go
That's
down
good for
there.
everybody to know that it's all cash.
I would say for the majority. Every now and then, because I'm on some of these lists where people are trying to sell something, and they'll say, well, there's some owner financing or whatever.
But it's
I
not
think
bank financing.
it is not for foreigners.
Okay.
If you do any kind of thing with the bank or trying to get money, you would be doing it in your home country with whatever assets that you could, would have here, and then bringing that in cash form to your sellers and builders and that sort of thing.
So you see all that, and then you fly home.
So, yes.
And did you have a moment when you flew home where you said, what the heck? Is this what
Well, the day before I was leaving, I saw my realtor again, and we chatted about it, and I was like, Eric, this is the money that I have. This is what I have. So I don't want just a piece of land. I would need to build something on that too. And so we debated that. We decided, okay, this is what I'll offer. Let me know. And then when I was flying back home, I think it was like a day or so later, and I'm landing in LAX, and I turn my phone back on. There's his voice message saying they've accepted your offer.
Oh my gosh, did you have a
like,
panic attack?
I almost did, and I almost grabbed the shoulders of the guy next to me and was like, oh my gosh, it's happening. But I kept it cool.
That's very cool.
But it was pretty exciting. And then he is married to a designer builder that's down there. They've been down there for, gosh, I might have this wrong, but maybe 10, 15 years, something like that.
Were they from the States?
My realtor is from Toronto, so he's Canadian, and then his husband is from Minnesota area.
Okay.
But yes, so he's American, and they've been down there, but
he was the design builder that came up with the plan for your home.
Exactly.
So tell me a little bit about your home, because when I saw pictures, there are a couple things that I just was like, this is the coolest place I've ever seen. And we're going to show them, so I'm excited about that. And it's also, side note, available on Airbnb, so I can go stay there. So I'm very excited about that. But tell me, did you have a dream in your mind of what is this place going to look like or feel like? And then did you express that to the builder, or tell me about that process?
Yeah, so we had met over dinner, and we had chatted quite a bit about it. And because he was already familiar with the property, he knew this little outcropping area that looked off into the mountains. So I wanted something 2 levels to where the open area on top could be used for something like yoga space, or a place where you could have anybody setting up for educational purposes. So the second floor is still kind of a work in progress, and wait and see what kind of happens with that. But you could have a yoga class up there, or you could do all kinds of stuff. So I wanted something that would be open air, looking out into the mountains and just really immersed in that feel of nature. And you do definitely get that feeling.
Feels like a treehouse, kind of.
It really does.
Yeah.
There is a green macaw sanctuary that they have tried to reintroduce these beautifully amazing birds out there, because they used to be in that area and then they weren't. And so there are so many wildlife sanctuaries and places that are really trying to improve upon the wildlife and bring them back.
Oh, that is
so
amazing.
you see these guys swooping out in front of the deck, because it's only a couple of miles, and for them,
does that take your breath away when you see that?
It is so cool when you see these beautiful green macaws. It's just enchanting. And so I wanted that incorporated into the build, and then John, my builder, had already had some ideas, and he had used shipping containers as his foundation for some of his other builds. So I was able to look at some of his previous designs and builds to get an idea of sort of what his feel is and what his designs are like. And so from there, we just started brainstorming ideas, and he was really crafting a lot of taking the idea of having the open air space on top and then the bedroom's living space more down on the bottom.
So when you were thinking about how this was going to look, were you actually putting into place ideas that you had in your mind and talking to him about that? Did you say, I want to have an open space, I want to have a lot of color, I want to have, what were the non-negotiables for you that stacked your dream up with what you were seeing in reality?
Well, the open space for a yoga area was a big part, and basically having the windows, having all of this attraction and visual of this big open space into the mountains was my main point of that. I have to say that he has brought a lot of the style and the specifics to it that I've really been blown away with a lot of his finishing touches and the floors.
Let's talk about the floors, because that's my favorite thing.
Floors, it seems like it's everybody's favorite thing. So we had talked about the practicality of, do you have wood? Do you have other things? But it's Costa Rica. It's a rainforest. So you've got all the little critters that could cause problems. And so the polished concrete floors is what he had recommended.
But these aren't just polished concrete, because when you think of polished concrete, you think of gray concrete floors.
And then he threw on this beautiful acid stain of that turquoise that just ends up looking like you're in the ocean.
It looks like the ocean.
Yeah.
It is the most gorgeous thing I think I've ever seen.
Thanks. Yeah. So.
And when I saw that, I'm like, I'm going.
I
actually thought, maybe I want to do that in my own bathroom here. It
turned out really, really great. They did a really great job with that. So it has that, I don't want to call it an industrial feel, but it definitely has more of that.
It's got a little bit of that vibe.
It has a little bit of that.
It just feels very edgy, but earthy at the same time.
Right.
Yeah, super cool.
So
I think that one of the things that people might take away from that is the fact that it's hard to just get the steps going, but once you got them going, and what was the biggest challenge that you had throughout this process to keep yourself not doubting yourself and am I doing the right thing? What was the biggest challenge?
It was, I think, probably doing things from California. Mm-hmm. So even after I made the offer in July, that got accepted. It was a few months before I actually flew back to close on the property, and then taking the steps to, okay, now let's start the design process. It was definitely, probably the hardest thing for me was to have patience. And as Eric, my realtor, had said, if you don't have patience when you come to Costa Rica will beat it into you.
So that was kind of a life lesson, though, because you're type A personality.
Right.
I'm type A personality, like getting stuff done.
Exactly.
So how did you work around that? How did you?
Well, it was various trips down to Costa Rica and just trying to keep that ball rolling. You know, my daughter and I went back down there a few months after we'd closed on the property to talk more about the design. And at that particular time, his heavy machinery operator, John's guy, had a couple of the refrigerated containers that were suddenly available to build with. There had been sort of a decrease in their availability because this was back when I think Turkey had had their big earthquakes, and we just didn't have a lot of containers. All the extra shipping containers, refrigerated containers were going overseas direction. But literally the night we were flying in, John gets a call from his heavy machinery guy and is like, hey, no crunch here, but if you want, I've got 2 extras that are available right now. And so he was like, no pressure. You don't have to buy them now, but if you want them.
How long was it from the beginning of, I bought this property, I've accomplished that dream, now I'm going to build, to finished product? How long was that timeline?
Couple of years.
Yeah.
Which
so
I didn't
really
think it would really be that long, but it was that long. It took a while. So I would say I closed on the property in November. I probably started really talking about the specifics of designs, and here's money to design this and to get it to the architect, because it's all a big permitting process too. You have to jump through all of those hoops like you would in the States too.
So you relied heavily on your realtor to support that process and your builder, because I would imagine with you not being there, that
absolutely. And there were times that I needed to come down there so I could go down to their municipality office and make sure that the property was transferred into my name and to pay my property taxes on that. All of those little things are different than they are here. And then another time of going there with my realtor's partner to get the electricity turned on.
And you don't speak Spanish.
I speak
a little bit.
I speak some Spanish enough to get by. Having my realtor's partner there to help with the at the electric component of things was clutch. I don't think I probably could have done that on my own, but going down to the municipality office with my daughter in tow and telling them in Spanish, all right, I bought this last year. I need to make sure this is in my name. How much are property taxes? And they're not much down there compared to California, certainly.
Which is good to know.
those were all steps that I did on subsequent trips. So that all had to be in my name, and I had to work with the builder to then, once he got my ideas in place, then he sent those over to his architect that he has worked with. And, he's been doing this for a while, so he has a great team that architect then made up all the plans and then takes the next step of going to the municipality offices to get the permits.
It's just a lot, right?
It is a lot.
Yeah.
And then one day I get the picture from my builder, like, we've got permits now. So
when have you been back since it's been completed?
Yes, my daughter and I went back at the end of September, beginning of October, and we stayed there.
How did that feel?
It was a little nerve-wracking. It was exciting, but I would get video updates of how things were going, and then I would get the heads up of like, okay, now we got to get this done, and this is the next big ticket item that's coming through, so I could prepare a little bit more financially of what that was going to look like.
Did you have a feeling though of, did you stand back and take a moment and say, I can't believe I did this. This is pretty awesome.
Definitely. And I think that it was above and beyond what I had anticipated. And I hadn't actually seen the floors until we rolled up. So seeing it for the first time, and especially being there with my young daughter, that was super cool.
Very cool.
To finally okay, wow, I can't believe this. We're actually staying in this house.
Well, I am so proud of you and so impressed with what you've accomplished. And I just wondered, do you have another dream in the back of your mind of what you want to do next? Have you thought about that?
Well, I have pretty much drained the coffers on the
dreams don't have to cost a lot of money.
They don't. So there's still more ideas with this second floor that I have, this open air second area that I still want to move along with. I think that it still has a lot of potential. So that is it looking the same way in 5 years as it looks right now? Probably not. I think there'll be more that I can add on to it. Plus I've got almost 13 acres.
That's crazy. So you could always add another house or something.
I could.
Or a compound.
Yeah.
You could have a yoga compound.
You totally could.
Yeah.
When I first closed on the property, I hiked a lot of that jungle forest with a couple of the guys that do a lot of the actual construction. So, I kind of joked that, all right, I'm off into the forest with these two guys with machetes. If you don't see me in a while, that's where you can look for me. And they were familiar with the area. And it's like, here's a creek here. There's a little flat spot where you could have another place here. You could go a little bit further. This area hasn't really been cleared out so much, so it's a little dense and thick. But we spent a few hours marching around on that property, and by the end of it was just like, okay. And that was all in Spanish too. And
the fact that you walk around with guys with machetes, you are so brave, and I am so thankful for you joining us here. That's just amazing. I'm so excited to have you here. I can't wait for everybody to see the videos, and I appreciate you coming through.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
It's been exciting.
Yeah.
It's been a journey.
There you go. Keep
and
on
the journey
dreaming.
is still going on, but yeah, it's been exciting.
Okay, keep on dreaming. I can't wait to see what you do next, and I can't wait to visit.
Thanks. Can't wait to have you.
There you go.